After my dad passed, I found out. He'd been sending my college fund to support a secret family overseas, and now they're demanding a share of his estate. The funeral was on a Tuesday. Dad had been sick for 8 months, so we'd had time to prepare, or at least I thought we had. The cancer took him fast once it spread, and by the end he was mostly unconscious, hooked up to machines that beeped and whirred in rhythms that became the soundtrack to our goodbye. Mom held his hand while I sat in the corner chair, watching his chest rise and fall with mechanical precision until it didn't anymore. 3 days later, I was sitting in his home office sorting through paperwork when I found the first transfer receipt. It was tucked between his insurance documents and tax returns, a wire transfer for $2,847 to something called Overseas Family Support Services, dated just 6 weeks before he died. The memo line said, "Monthly assistance, M. Santos family." I stared at that piece of paper for probably 10 minutes, trying to make sense of it. Dad had been meticulous about money his entire life. Every expense tracked, every receipt filed, every dollar accounted for. He'd shown me his spreadsheets dozens of times, explaining how my college fund was growing, how the compound interest would cover 4 years of tuition plus room and board at any state school I wanted. The idea that he'd been sending money somewhere else, to people I'd never heard of, felt impossible. But there it was in black and white, stamped and processed by First National Bank. I kept digging. The more I searched through his files, the more receipts I found. Monthly wire transfers going back 7 years, always to the same service, always with the same memo about the Santos family. The amounts varied, sometimes $2,000, sometimes $3,500, once as much as $5,000 during what I realized was the month I'd gotten accepted to Northwestern, and we'd celebrated by going out to that expensive steakhouse downtown. My hands started shaking as I pulled out my laptop and logged into Dad's bank account. He'd given me the password months ago when the chemo made it hard for him to handle bills. The online statement loaded slowly, and when it did, I felt my stomach drop. The college savings account that was supposed to have $127,000 in it had a balance of $31,847. I called the bank immediately. The customer service representative, a woman named Jennifer with a practiced, sympathetic voice, walked me through the transaction history. Wire transfers totaling $95,150 over 7 years, all to Overseas Family Support Services, which she explained was a money transfer company that specialized in sending funds to the Philippines. "Sir, I'm showing these were all authorized by the account holder," she said carefully. "Each transfer required his PIN and security verification." I hung up and sat there staring at the computer screen. The Philippines. Dad had never mentioned knowing anyone in the Philippines. He'd never talked about traveling there, never mentioned Filipino friends or colleagues. The only international connection I could think of was his deployment to Southeast Asia during Vietnam, but he'd rarely talked about that except to say it was hot and he was glad to come home. That evening, I showed Mom the receipts. She went pale reading through them, her coffee mug forgotten on the kitchen table between us. "I don't understand," she said, looking up at me with confused eyes. "Your father never mentioned any family in the Philippines. Are you sure these are real?" I pulled up the bank statements on my phone and showed her the transaction history. She studied each line item, her expression shifting from confusion to something that looked like betrayal. $95,000, she whispered. "That was supposed to be for your education." The next morning, I called Overseas Family Support Services. After 20 minutes on hold listening to generic elevator music, I reached a representative named Carlos, who spoke with a slight accent I couldn't place. "I'm calling about transfers my father made to the Santos family," I explained. "He passed away recently, and I'm trying to understand what these payments were for." "I'm sorry for your loss," Carlos said, his tone shifting to something more formal. "However, I cannot discuss specific customer transactions without proper authorization. You would need to provide documentation showing you're the legal representative of the estate. I'm his son. The money was supposed to be my college fund. I understand this must be difficult, but our privacy policies are strict. If you can provide a death certificate and proof of estate administration, we can discuss the matter further." I spent the rest of the day at the courthouse getting certified copies of Dad's death certificate and filing preliminary estate paperwork. The clerk, a tired-looking woman in her 50s, explained that since Dad had died without a will, the estate would go through probate, which could take months. She handed me a stack of forms and told me to come back when I had everything filled out. 3 days later, I called Overseas Family Support Services again, this time with all the documentation they'd requested. Carlos transferred me to a supervisor named Maria, who spoke with more authority but the same careful tone. "Mr. Richardson, I can confirm that your father, Robert Richardson, has been sending monthly support payments to Maria Santos and her 3 children in Cebu City, Philippines, since 2017. The payments were designated as family support." Family support? What kind of family support? According to our records, the payments were for living expenses, medical care, and educational costs for the children. I felt like I was falling. "Are you saying my father had another family?" "I cannot speculate about relationships, Mr. Richardson. I can only tell you what our records show regarding the financial transfers. Can you give me contact information for this Maria Santos?" "I'm afraid I cannot provide customer contact information. However, I can tell you that Ms. Santos has been made aware of your father's passing, and she has expressed interest in speaking with his American family." That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept running through everything I thought I knew about my father. He'd been a good husband to Mom, a devoted dad to me. He'd worked as an electrical engineer for the same company for 30 years, coached my little league team, taught me to drive, helped me with math homework. The idea that he'd been secretly supporting another family felt like discovering he was a completely different person. I was lying in bed, staring at the ceiling when my phone buzzed with an email from an address I didn't recognize. mariasantos.cebu@gmail.com. The subject line said, "About Robert Richardson, your father." The message was was in broken English, but the meaning was clear. Dear Richardson family, I am Maria Santos from Cebu City. I am very sad to hear about Robert passing. He was a good man who helped my family for many years. I know this must be shock for you. Robert told me he had son in America, but he never tell you about us. I think now we should talk. My children, they ask about their American brother. Please contact me if you want to know truth about your father. I read the email 5 times before showing it to Mom. She sat on the edge of my bed, reading it on my phone, her face cycling through emotions I couldn't name. Their American brother? She said finally. What does that mean? I called the number Maria had included in her email. It took several attempts to get through. The international connection kept dropping. But finally, I heard a woman's voice speaking accented English. Hello, this is Maria Santos. This is David Richardson, Robert's son. There was a long pause, then the sound of crying. David, she said, I am so sorry about your father. He talked about you all the time. He was very proud. Can you tell me what your relationship was with my father? Another pause. Robert is father of my children. We meet when he come to Philippines for work in 2016. He was lonely, I think. He tell me his wife was sick. The room started spinning. Mom had been diagnosed with early-stage breast cancer in 2016. She'd gone through surgery and chemotherapy, but she'd recovered completely. Dad had been her primary caretaker during treatment, driving her to appointments, managing her medications, sleeping in the hospital chair during her surgery. How many children? I asked. 3 children. Roberto is 6 years old, Elena is 4, and baby Michael is 2. They are your half-brothers and sister. I hung up the phone and ran to the bathroom, where I threw up everything I'd eaten that day. When I came back to my room, Mom was still sitting on my bed, staring at the email on my phone. He was having an affair, she said quietly. While I was going through cancer treatment, your father was having an affair and fathering children with another woman. Over the next few days, I pieced together more of the story through phone calls and emails with Maria. Dad had been sent to the Philippines in 2016 as part of a consulting project for his engineering firm. He'd spent 3 months there, supposedly helping a manufacturing plant upgrade their electrical systems. That's where he'd met Maria, who worked as a translator for international business visitors. According to Maria, Dad had told her that his wife was terminally ill and that his marriage was essentially over. He'd said he was staying for his son's sake, but that he was desperately lonely. Maria had believed him, had fallen in love with him, had gotten pregnant with his child. When Dad returned to the United States, he'd continued the relationship through video calls and messages. He'd promised to divorce Mom and bring Maria and their son to America. Instead, he'd kept sending money and making excuses about why the divorce was taking so long. He always say next year, Maria told me during one of our calls. Next year he will tell his family. Next year he will bring us to America. But next year never come. The money transfers started in 2017, a few months after Roberto was born. Dad had been sending between $2,000 and $3,500 every month, enough to cover rent, food, medical care, and schooling for Maria and the children in a country where the cost of living was much lower than the United States. But the money had been coming from my college fund. Every month for 7 years, Dad had been transferring money that was supposed to pay for my education to support the secret family he'd created halfway around the world. I confronted Mom with everything I'd learned. We sat at the kitchen table where we'd eaten thousands of family dinners, and I watched her face crumble as I explained the timeline, the children, the promises Dad had made and broken. He was with her while I was getting chemo, she said, her voice hollow. While I was losing my hair and throwing up every day, he was falling in love with someone else and starting a new family. I'm so sorry, Mom. $95,000, she said. Your entire college fund. Gone. 2 weeks later, I received a package from the Philippines containing photographs and documents. Maria had sent pictures of the 3 children, Roberto, Elena, and Michael, along with their birth certificates listing Robert Richardson as the father. There were also photos of Dad with the kids, images I'd never seen before showing him pushing Roberto on a swing, holding baby Elena, teaching Michael to walk. In the photos, Dad looked happy in a way I'd rarely seen. He was smiling genuinely, not the tired smile he wore at home. He looked younger, more relaxed. It was like seeing a completely different version of my father, one who existed in a parallel life I'd never known about. The birth certificates were official documents from the Philippine Statistics Authority. Dad's name, passport number, and signature were on all 3. There was no denying these were his children. Along with the photos came a letter from a lawyer in Cebu City named Attorney Rodriguez. The letter, written in formal English, explained that Maria Santos was claiming that Robert Richardson had promised to provide for his Philippine children in his will, and that since no such provision existed, she was prepared to pursue legal action to secure their inheritance rights. The children are entitled to support from their father's estate under both Philippine and international law, the letter stated. Ms. Santos is prepared to file claims in both jurisdictions to ensure her children receive their rightful inheritance. I took the letter to a local attorney named Patricia Walsh, who specialized in estate law. She read through everything I'd brought, the bank records, the birth certificates, the photographs, the lawyer's letter, with the methodical attention of someone who'd seen complicated family situations before. This is going to be messy, she said finally. If those birth certificates are legitimate, and it appears they are, then your father has 3 additional heirs who are entitled to a share of his estate under intestacy law. What does that mean exactly? It means, instead of you and your mother inheriting everything, the estate will be divided among all 5 heirs, your mother, you, and the 3 children in the Philippines. Your mother gets her spousal share, which is typically 1/3 to 1/2 depending on the state. The rest gets divided equally among all the children. I felt sick. So they get a portion of our house? Our savings? Potentially, yes. The estate includes all your father's assets, the house, his retirement accounts, his life insurance, everything. If the Philippine children are legitimate heirs, they're entitled entitled to their share. Attorney Walsh explained that we had several options. We could contest the paternity of the children, though the birth certificates and photographs made that unlikely to succeed. We could try to argue that Dad's promises to Maria weren't legally binding, but that wouldn't affect the children's inheritance rights. Or we could try to negotiate a settlement that gave the Philippine family some portion of the estate without going through lengthy international litigation. International probate cases can take years and cost tens of thousands in legal fees, she warned. Sometimes it's better to negotiate a reasonable settlement than to fight something you're likely to lose anyway. That night, I called Maria to try to understand what she actually wanted. I do not want to hurt you or your mother, she said. But my children, they deserve something from their father. He promised to take care of them always. Now he is gone, but promise should still matter. What exactly are you asking for? Attorney Rodriguez, he say children should get equal share with you, but I know that is hard for your family. Maybe we can agree on something fair. Money for children's education, for medical care, something to help them have better life like Robert wanted. I asked her to be specific about numbers. Maybe $50,000 for each child, she said. For education fund, like what Robert was making for you. $150,000 total. That is fair, I think. $150,000. More than what was left in my college fund, and a significant portion of Dad's overall estate, but potentially less than what they might get if they pursued full inheritance rights through the courts. I discussed the offer with Mom and Attorney Walsh. Mom was devastated by the whole situation, barely able to process that Dad had been living a double life for 7 years. She alternated between rage at his betrayal and grief over losing not just her husband, but her understanding of who he'd been. I don't want to give them anything, she said during one of our conversations. They destroyed our family. Why should we reward that? Because they're Dad's children, I said, and they didn't choose any of this. Attorney Walsh advised that $150,000 was probably less than what the children would receive through formal probate proceedings, especially if they could prove Dad had been supporting them consistently and had made promises about their future care. From a purely legal standpoint, she said, accepting their settlement offer might save you money in the long run. International litigation is expensive and time-consuming, and the outcome is uncertain. But there was another complication. Maria's lawyer had also filed claims with Dad's life insurance company and his retirement plan, arguing that the Philippine children should be listed as beneficiaries. Both accounts had Mom listed as the sole beneficiary, but Attorney Rodriguez was claiming that Dad's failure to include his other children constituted fraud or misrepresentation. The insurance company put a hold on the payout pending resolution of the competing claims. The retirement plan administrator did the same. Suddenly, Mom couldn't access any of Dad's benefits while the legal questions got sorted out. This could take months, Attorney Walsh explained. Maybe longer. The insurance companies won't pay out until they're certain they won't face additional claims later. Meanwhile, bills kept coming. Dad's final medical expenses, which insurance hadn't covered. The mortgage on our house, utilities, groceries, car payments. Mom had her own job, but it didn't cover all our expenses. We'd been counting on Dad's life insurance and retirement money to provide financial stability while I finished high school and started college. Instead, everything was frozen, while lawyers in 2 countries argued about who had rights to what. 3 months after Dad's death, I was supposed to send my deposit to Northwestern University. The deadline came and went. I called the admissions office to explain the situation and request an extension, but they could only hold my spot for so long. Other students were waiting for openings. We understand family financial difficulties, the admissions counselor told me, but we need to know by the end of the month whether you'll be enrolling. If not, we'll need to offer your spot to someone else. I'd been accepted to Northwestern's engineering program with partial academic scholarships, but I still needed $35,000 per year for tuition, room, and board. The money that was supposed to cover that was either gone to the Philippines or tied up in legal proceedings I couldn't control. I applied for additional financial aid and student loans, but the amounts weren't enough to cover the full cost. I started looking at cheaper alternatives, community college, state schools with lower tuition, programs I could afford without Dad's college fund. The stress was destroying Mom's health. She'd lost 15 pounds and couldn't sleep. Her doctor prescribed anxiety medication and suggested counseling, but she refused to talk to anyone about what Dad had done. How do I explain to a therapist that my husband of 25 years was secretly supporting another family while I was going through cancer treatment? She asked me. How do I admit that I never suspected anything? In May, Attorney Rodriguez flew from the Philippines to meet with us in person. He was a small, precise man in his 50s who spoke careful English and carried a briefcase full of documents. We met in Attorney Walsh's conference room, where he laid out his case methodically. My clients are not seeking to punish anyone, he said. They simply want recognition of their rights and provision for their future. Mr. Richardson made commitments to these children. Those commitments should be honored. He showed us additional documentation, medical records showing Dad's name on hospital forms when the children were born, school enrollment papers listing him as the father, even a lease agreement for Maria's apartment with his signature as a guarantor. Your father was very involved in these children's lives, Attorney Rodriguez continued. He video called them every week. He sent birthday presents and Christmas gifts. He promised to bring them to America for visits. These were not casual relationships. He pulled out printed emails between Dad and Maria, messages I'd never seen before. In them, Dad talked about his American son and how much he wanted his Philippine children to meet their half-brother. He wrote about feeling torn between 2 families, guilty about keeping secrets, but unable to figure out how to bring everyone together without destroying lives. Reading those emails felt like discovering that Dad had been a completely different person than I'd thought. He'd been living with enormous guilt and conflict for years, trying to be a good father to children on 2 continents while lying to everyone he loved. He was planning to tell you, Attorney Rodriguez said. In his final email to Maria, sent just 2 weeks before he died, he wrote that he was going to explain everything to his American family after his treatment ended. He wanted to arrange for the children to visit, to meet you and your mother. But Dad had died before he could have those conversations. Instead of a planned revelation, we'd discovered his secret family through bank records and legal claims. Attorney Rodriguez proposed a formal settlement agreement. The Philippine children would receive $120,000 total, $40,000 each, in exchange for waiving any additional claims against Dad's estate. The money would be placed in trust accounts for their education and medical care, managed by a bank in the Philippines with oversight from his law firm. This is less than their full legal entitlement, he said, but it recognizes the difficult situation for your family and provides certainty for everyone involved. Mom and I asked for time to consider the offer. That night, we sat in Dad's office surrounded by the financial documents that had started this whole nightmare. I keep thinking about those children, Mom said finally. They didn't ask to be born into this situation, and they lost their father too. Are you saying you want to accept the settlement? I'm saying your father created this mess, and now we have to deal with it. Fighting in court for years won't bring him back or change what he did. Maybe it's better to resolve this and try to move forward. We accepted the settlement offer. Attorney Walsh drafted the agreement, which took another month to finalize because it had to comply with both American and Philippine law. The document was 15 pages long and covered every possible contingency. What would happen if one of the children died? How the trust funds would be managed? What documentation would be required for withdrawals? The settlement cost us $120,000 plus legal fees, which totaled another $18,000. Combined with the money Dad had already sent to the Philippines, his secret family ultimately cost our family more than $230,000. But it also meant Mom could finally access Dad's life insurance and retirement benefits. The insurance company released a $200,000 payout, and the retirement plan distributed another $180,000. After taxes and the settlement payment, we had enough money to keep the house and cover basic expenses, but my college fund was gone. I ended up enrolling at the local state university instead of Northwestern. The tuition was less than half the cost, and I could live at home to save money on room and board. It wasn't the engineering program I'd dreamed of, but it was a path forward. The hardest part was explaining to friends and extended family why my college plans had changed. I couldn't bring myself to tell most people the truth about Dad's secret family. Instead, I said the medical bills from his cancer treatment had been higher than expected, and we needed to make financial adjustments. Only my closest friends knew the real story, and even then, I didn't share all the details. How do you explain that your father, who seemed like a devoted family man, had been living a double life for 7 years? How do you process discovering you have 3 half-siblings you've never met, living in poverty on the other side of the world? 6 months after the settlement was finalized, Maria sent me an email with photos of the children starting the new school year. Roberto was in 2nd grade, Elena in kindergarten, and Michael in preschool. They were wearing clean uniforms and carrying new backpacks, smiling at the camera. The children are doing well in school, Maria wrote. Roberto is very smart in mathematics, like his father. Elena loves to draw pictures. Michael is learning to read. They ask about their American brother sometimes. I tell them maybe someday they will meet you. I stared at those photos for a long time. These kids looked like Dad. Roberto had his eyes. Elena had his smile. Michael had his stubborn chin. They were my half-siblings, sharing my DNA and my father's legacy. But they were also strangers whose existence had derailed my life plans. I never responded to Maria's email. I wasn't ready to have a relationship with Dad's other family. Wasn't sure I'd ever be ready. The rational part of me knew they were innocent victims of Dad's choices, but the emotional part of me still resented them for existing, for costing me my college fund and my understanding of who my father was. Mom started seeing a counselor eventually, someone who specialized in helping people process betrayal and complicated grief. She said it helped to talk to someone who didn't judge her for staying angry at Dad, even though he was dead. I loved him for 25 years, she told me after one of her sessions, but I don't know if the person I loved was real or just a performance he put on for us while he lived his real life somewhere else. 2 years later, I'm still at the state university, still living at home, still working part-time to help cover expenses. I'll graduate with a decent degree and manageable student loan debt, but it's not the future Dad and I had planned together when he was showing me those college fund spreadsheets. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if Dad had lived long enough to tell us about Maria and the children himself. Would it have been easier to process if he'd explained his choices, apologized for his deception, tried to bring both families together? Or would it have been just as devastating to learn that the man I'd looked up to my entire life had been capable of such sustained dishonesty? I still have the photos Maria sent, stored in a folder on my computer that I rarely open. Sometimes late at night I find myself looking at pictures of Roberto, Elena, and Michael, trying to see myself in their faces, wondering what kind of person I'd be if I'd grown up with siblings, if Dad had been honest from the beginning, if our family had been big enough to include everyone he loved. But mostly, I try not to think about it. The settlement is final, the legal battles are over, and Dad's secrets are buried with him. Mom and I are building a new normal that doesn't include the future we'd planned or the father we thought we knew. The hardest part isn't the money, though losing my college fund certainly changed my trajectory. The hardest part is living with the knowledge that people you trust completely can be living entirely different lives than the ones they share with you. Dad coached my baseball team and helped with homework and taught me to drive, all while sending thousands of dollars every month to children I didn't know existed. He was a good father to me and a good father to them, but he was also a liar who built his double life on deception that lasted 7 years. years. Those two truths exist simultaneously, and I'm still learning how to hold both of them without losing my mind. The estate is settled now. The house is ours. The bills are paid, and Mom is slowly rebuilding her sense of who she is without Dad. I'm halfway through my degree program and have decent job prospects when I graduate. We survived the legal nightmare and the financial crisis, but we're different people than we were before Dad died and his secrets came to light. Sometimes I get emails from Maria with updates about the children. Roberto is 8 now and wants to be an engineer like his father. Elena is 6 and loves to sing. Michael is 4 and asks questions about America. I don't respond to these emails, but I don't delete them either. They sit in my inbox like windows into a parallel universe where my father was someone else's dad too. I don't know if I'll ever be ready to meet my half-siblings or have a relationship with Maria. Right now, the wound is still too fresh, the betrayal too recent, but maybe someday, when enough time has passed, I'll be curious enough about the other half of Dad's life to reach out and try to understand the man who loved 2 families on 2 continents while lying to everyone he claimed to care about. For now, I'm focused on finishing school and helping Mom rebuild the life Dad's secrets destroyed. We're learning to be a family of 2 instead of 3, learning to trust our own judgment after discovering how wrong we'd been about someone we thought we knew completely. The money is gone, the college dreams are adjusted, and the father I thought I had never really existed. But we're still here, still moving forward, still figuring out how to build something honest from the ruins of Dad's carefully constructed lies.